Hi, I'm Daniel from splmixing.com and you're watching Mix Rescue. Mix Rescue is divided into three parts: mix preparation, mixing, and review. For Mix Rescue submissions, send your files and download links to daniel@splmixing.com with the email subject Mix Rescue. Welcome to part 1. Previously on Mix Rescue. Today we are prepping the mix Real Life. I would probably describe it as an indie rock / pop track. And that is definitely not what I want in terms of the snare drum sound. And the vocals, they're just, I don't know, they're just a bit lost. They're not really out front in front of the band. So those two things in particular, Kim, I assure you, we can fix this. All right, so let's go dive into the drums and see what we can do about them. I've muted for the moment the room tracks, and the reason why is that I'm not sure whether I'm going to use them yet. I'm going to be using today this corralometer. It's a free plugin. It's a multi-band correlation meter. I've actually used it in a recording drums video, which I'll link above. The basic principle is that in order to compare two different signals, you pan one to the left and one to the right. And this is actually on the mix bus. So this is comparing the differences between the left and the right. And the more differences, the more out of phase it is. Anything above that zero line, the more in phase it is. So below there, bad. Up there, good. And this is all frequencies from 20 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. First, I want to get this kick isolated. I'm going to start gating out these. And the only reason I'm doing this is because having had a look through the tracks, I know that there's phase issues. Some of the tracks agree that the kick is in phase with itself and others disagree with the snare. So we have to do a bit of playing around with these tracks to get it to where we want it to go. So here's my drum gate preset. This is normally used for samples, but I'm actually going to be using it for just the gate function here. Solo the kick. We don't want to gate it too much. I'm going to copy those settings straight down to the out. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking to exclude the snare in particular. That seems pretty good to me. Copy this one down. And on the tracer you can see that's a snare. So we're well above it in terms of the detection. Great. We want to now go through the snare just to make sure that that's all good. Cool. Let's check it in a different part of the song. That's sounding pretty good to me. Let's move on to the snare bottom. Just going to copy those settings straight down. Just going to tightly gate that compared to the top. Now I want to go through and check the polarity of the different drums. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to pan one item to one side and the other to the opposite. And the reason is that we're looking for differences and we're looking for similarities. So the similarities are what's common to both. What's common to both is essentially mono information. We want the low end to be mono. We want that at the very least to be in phase. Anything that's not is going to fall below this 0 mark. As you'll see, watch this. If they were identical signals, then it would be all the way up to 1. So we can expect that there's little variances in there. Watch what happens when I activate this plugin which has a phase flip on it, or a polarity reversal. Hear how much more solid that feels? That's obviously in a good state as it is. I'm now going to pan that over. I'm now going to pan this one to the left because we're going to compare that one. Yep, it's in a great place. All right, we'll leave those there for the moment. Let's move on to the snare. So for that, we're going to compare the top with the bottom. which is what I would expect. I would expect to see that they're out of phase with each other, and you can see it there with the waveform. So we can probably flip the top, I reckon, just so that we're keeping it in absolute phase, meaning that it's starting with a peak instead of a trough. That should fix our issue there, but as I say, I'm not 100% sold on this snare. It's just a bit flabby and kind of, it's like hitting a wet lettuce or something. It just, I don't know, it just doesn't really do much for me. Right, now we've got all of those kicks and all of those panned to the right hand side. Now we know that these two agree with each other. Actually, let's, before we do that, check the overheads. They actually agree on the kick, but they disagree on the snare. So if I flip the polarity of one side, you notice every time the snare hits, it gets a bit of a mound there, which tells me that the snare is in phase only when one overhead is out of phase with the other. If this doesn't make sense, go back, watch the drum recording video. But then of course you got the issue is that the kick is out of phase now. So which one do I want to keep? I'm probably going to leave it as it was. In this case, I want to keep the kick as it is, but let's just test that against the kick. All right, and the way we do that is we're going to take this and move it across. All right, maybe we can do this. Let's see what happens now if I test them against the snare drum. What if we reverse those? It's not real solid though, is it? Right, so what I can do is I can bus these to their own track, like a stereo overhead master track. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a copy of this top snare. This is going to be a trigger or a side chain. Let's send that out to bus 1. Snare side chain. All right, now I'm going to duplicate this overhead master. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a gate on this. I'm going to feed in bus 1 or snare side chain. I'm going to flip the polarity, and that will be sending a gated, an already gated signal to the overheads, to the copy of the overheads. So we should be able to get rid of the snare this way. I'll solo safe that so that it's always in the mix. Just move that up there. And I'm going to make this a different color just so I know what it is. All right. Where's our, oh yeah, there we go. So move that up. So every time this gate opens, it is putting a out of phase copy of the complete overheads and cancelling that out completely against the original. So you can still hear a little bit of that coming through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the very beginning. I'm going to shave a few milliseconds off that. I've got my nudge set to 100. We'll take that back 500, see if that helps. I'm going to adjust that a little bit further. Let's take it back even further. So without that track, this is what it sounds like. So we've completely subtracted that snare from there. I can now replace that. I may keep the bottom snare. I don't think I will. At the very least, we'll have... Stay tuned for the next part of Mix Rescue, and as always, happy mixing. Let us know if you enjoy this series by giving it a like, share the video, and subscribe to SPL Mixing, remembering to ring that notification bell so that you don't miss a future upload.